Okay, so welcome to this short presentation on potential interviews, all right? So remember, there are two scenarios to applying for grad school. One is you apply to the school and then they rank all the applicants and then they select the top students and give them funding or full scholarship or full funding for their grad school. Okay, so under that circumstance, they're going to ask you to submit your CV, your transcript, maybe a letter of interest and some of those documents. All right, that's a different scenario. And I've seen that with people who are in economics, in the social sciences, and then in those other departments. I'll talk about that some other time. But for now, my focus is on the department where you would have to speak with a potential prof before you apply for admission. And a lot of the programs in Canada and the US, that's what you have to do. You have to apply to a prof, and then the prof, if they have funding and you're a good match for their research, before they contact you and interview you and then give you the permission to go ahead and apply for admission using them as potential supervisors. That is, assuming you meet the admission criteria. Once you are admitted, the prof is going to kind of pick you up in their research lab, fund you and help you with your grad school and all these kind of things. Okay, so those are more of like the engineering, the sciences and all those STEM programs, right? But it differs from university to university. So you being the applicant should check whether in your program of study, you need a prof or not. If you don't need a prof before you apply for admission, by all means, follow the admission guidelines and then send them the documents they want, and then you apply for the admission. But if you need a prof, just like we have in engineering, mostly in Canada and the US, you really have to find a professor who is willing to sponsor you for your master's or your PhD before you go ahead and apply for admission. So that is the category of people that I'm talking about today, that you need to find a prof. So in this case, you've already sent your transcript, you've sent your CV, and then the prof has actually notified you that, hey, I want to have a chat with you. Okay. Now, at that instant, remember, it's an interview, all right? It's never a chat or anything. It's some form of interview, okay? And I'll explain to you why. So the first thing I want you to have at the back of your mind is that as soon as the prof says, after they see your transcript and your CV and they say, oh yes, I want to have a chat with you, know that it's an interview, okay? And so if it is an interview, then you have to do some form of a homework before you go in for the interview. All right. So there are some. I'm using my experiences as a guideline. It doesn't mean that is what every prof watches out for. Okay. But in most scenarios, it's accurate. So in my case, when I say I want to have a chat with you, there are some general things and specific things I'm watching out for. All right. And it differs whether you are doing a master's or a PhD, but the general ones apply to both. So for both masters and PhD, if I say I want to interview you or I want to have a chat with you, one, the first thing for the general stuff is what? Communication. Okay, so I'm looking at the level of communication of this person. Why? When I pick you as a student in my research group, you'll be writing conference papers, journal papers, you'll be attending conferences and presenting and all that, right? And so at least at this stage, I want to have a knowledge of you having some form of, basic and not basic, but some form of advanced, communications with or command over the English language, whether you are from Iran, India, Nigeria, Ghana, wherever. All right. And so I want to see that the communication is there and that you can actually communicate effectively in English. In fact, some of the profs will even go ahead and give you questions to solve as a way of checking for your writing. All right. So in this case, remember, we are checking for writing, we are checking for speaking and all these kind of things. So with the writing, I've seen scenarios where profs actually give students some tasks to do. In engineering, I've seen where profs actually give students questions to solve. So they give you questions to solve, and then based on those questions, they can actually assess your level of communication in terms of what writing. But with the speaking, it's like I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm watching now for how you're answering the questions and then all that. And that is really important. Okay. So that is the first part you need to be watching out for, the communication part. And then with the general stuff I'm looking out for. The second one is the genuine interest in research. I want to see that this person is not trying to just move away from where they are. Sorry, I wanted to use escape, but that's not a good word, all right? But what I'm trying to find out is this person really genuine in terms of, are they really interested in the research? That is really what I want. Why? Because I want somebody who can really come and make an impact with the research. And so I'm watching out for people who have genuine interest in the research. Now, if you really don't have interest in the research, don't go in for it, because you're going to get frustrated sometimes if you're not careful. All right. And so you might really want to watch out for those things that before you go in. And so beside that, for me, these are the two major things I'll be looking at for your level of communication, and then also for your interest in the research, okay? And then from there, now I move on to the specifics, okay? So with the specifics, that is where I have some form of a few information or things you have to do. So the caution here is that when the prof says that I want to have a chat with you, give me a day and time, you don't just go ahead and give them maybe 2 days or maybe a day, no. You really have to gauge whether you can do a good homework before you meet with the prof. So typically I ask people to give about 3 or 4 days or 5 days, you know, that kind of thing. You don't want to obviously not say in 3 weeks time, no, but at least a week or maybe that kind of thing, so that you have ample time to do your homework, okay? So with the specific stuff, all right, what I'm watching out for is that, is this person interested in the research? That is the general. But with the specific one, do they have some form of background knowledge in my research that I'm actually conducting? So you would have to take some time and familiarize yourself with the research work of that particular professor. It's important. So you don't just go in there and talk, no. You have to go check. You can go to Google Scholar, all right? So you can go to Google Scholar. Then also you can go to the person's profile, the prof's profile. Usually some of the profs, they update their profiles with their current research work, okay? So current research work, all right? So you as the potential student would have to go read all the stuff the prof has on their profile, wherever you found them. Go download some of their papers from Google Scholar and read them, just to have what? A fair idea about some of the current research that they are doing. Now, this might not always be helpful. Why? Because I have published work, and currently I have different projects from the published work. So it's difficult to know which project I'm working on, but obviously it's not going to be different from my areas of research interest. And every prof has that on their profile. So you see that for my case, I'm interested in additive manufacturing. I'm interested in material characterization, high strain rate characterization, machine learning for materials discovery and all that. And so you realize that at least your research is going to be within these areas, you know. So if you download their current papers and you are reading, it doesn't mean that you are going to be doing a similar research. No, it could be different. But again, just to have a fair idea of how they do their research and then some of the background knowledge, that is really, really helpful. Okay, so make sure that you go read all about the professor's profile. Make sure that you go to Google Scholar and some of the other journals like, you know, material science and engineering, all these, you know, Scopus and all that, and you download some of their recent works, not the old works, recent works. And I'm talking about recent work like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Right? And then you kind of have a fair idea of how they are doing things over there in the lab. Because in that way, it actually also, for me, it gives you an idea of how you've really taken your time to familiarize yourself with my work. And that actually shows me some level of interest in the research that I'm doing. Not that I'm going to be asking you questions about the research work. It could be from anywhere, all right? Now, I've also seen scenarios where profs actually ask theoretical questions. Okay, so for example, if you are going to be doing something on material science and engineering or material science and or let's say biology, the prof can actually decide to ask you some form of basic questions to test your level of knowledge, right? Now remember, master students, PhD student, I am not looking out for somebody who is like, you know, he knows everything, no. But I'm looking out for somebody who has the basics so that we can build ourselves together from the basics. Okay, so sometimes some of the profs really want to check for the basics. They want to know that at least you have the basic stuff there. So if you don't have it or if you've forgotten about it, maybe you should go revise. You know, once the prof says, I want to have a chat with you, it means that they see a connection. Okay, so it means that you're in a good shape. So you might want to quickly revise a few things. And that is why I recommend reading the journal papers, because as you begin to read the journal papers, certain theories might come back to you that you might have forgotten. And then you quickly brush up on that before you meet the prof and have a chat with the prof. Okay? So note that it's an interview, and it'll be very helpful if you go read some of their research papers, some of their recent projects, some of the profiles that they have on their research group. Okay. And then the next one is, so whilst you are doing that, you are checking off what are some of the ongoing research in the lab of that prof. So in my lab right now, we have students who are working on ceramics, students who are working on metals, students who are working on machine learning, students who are working on finite element and all that. And if you go to my website or if you check Google Scholar, you can see some of the journal papers that have been published with some of my recent students, all right? And so in that way, it gives you a fair idea of the different research projects going on in the lab. Usually what happens is that it's going to be a build-up or an advanced form of some of those interests. It's not like it's going to be very, very, very different from what has been done in the lab. You know, sometimes it is, but then generally it's more of like related by some way, somehow to what is going on in the lab. So you want to do the homework and check out for some of the projects that they have in the lab. And with the areas where you're not really familiar with, you might want to quickly go read about them so that in case that is the area the prof wants you to go in, you have some foreknowledge about what is going on in the field. Again, I said this in my previous videos that I sometimes don't like the idea of students coming to me with their proposed research for my case. And I know other professors who are also like that. And the reason is that I might have money for a particular thing that I think you're a good fit and not have money for that particular research that you are interested in. Okay, so you always want to leave your options open when you are contacting the profs. In that way, you kind of get the upper hand when they contact you. And that is why it's important to go check what is going on in their lab. If you don't go and check what is going on in their lab, you might miss out on something. Okay, so those are things that you want to do. Now, other things that you also want to pay attention to in terms of when you meet with the prof is that you can be also asking questions about expectations, all right? So sometimes the prof will ask you, do you have any questions for me? Don't be asking about money and all that. So of course, later on, it comes in when you want to make sure you have enough funding to cover for your cost of living and like your tuition fees and all these kind of things, all right? But you should be kind of asking some general questions, you know, in terms of what are some of the general duties that you're going to be doing, or what are some of them is already online. So if the information is online, don't ask the prof. That shows that you're not doing your homework well. Okay, but if you can kind of ask questions about, you know, what are some of the regular expectations from a graduate student. So that is really my first point in terms of regular expectations. Okay. Okay, so in my case, if you ask me such a question, then I'll tell you that you're going to be doing the research, and then you're also going to be taking your coursework, and then you're also maybe in some scenarios you're going to be a teaching assistant. So typically these three things you'll be working on whilst you get your master's or your PhD. So the regular expectations are that you're going to be working in the lab, doing some research, or working on your computer, doing some research for the prof, and then also taking your regular courses. So if you are supposed to take maybe 7 courses or 10 courses, whatever, you have to make sure that you are taking the courses alongside doing the research, whilst you can also be assigned a teaching assistantship in some scenarios, okay? And that is important. So if you are supposed to ask questions, it's a good question to ask because sometimes it gives, it brings out some information which also will inform you whether you really want to go into such a scenario or not, okay? For example, for the teaching assistantships, some of the universities is mandatory. Once you are a graduate student, automatically you get assigned a teaching assistantship position. In some universities, both in Canada and the US, the same thing. Some universities, they rather ask you to apply if you're interested in a good match. So it's more of a competition. So you might want to know which of them you want to be in and how that is actually going to impact your research. Because remember, if you are dividing your time amongst the research, teaching assistantship, and then also the coursework, you want to really know how to balance your time out and all that, okay? Now, some of the research projects are done with other professors as well. So in that case, you might want to ask if there are other professors involved with the project that you are going to be working on, or the potential projects that you're going to be working on. In that case, you have a supervisor and co-supervisor, right? And I've seen situations where it's been very nice, and some other situations where it's not been so nice, right? So you might want to find out, are there going to be a co-supervisor in case you get assigned this position? Or you might also want to check out from the job advertisement, or if there was no advertisement, from some of the previous work to see whether every time they publish papers with other profs, right? So in my group, we do co-supervision with other professors, while some of them I do the sole supervision. And so it's sometimes a good question to ask so that you know what to expect. All right. And then you also want to find out, do they have any industry collaborators? It's important. Some of the research, a lot of the research we do have industry collaborators, but some of them don't. And so you might want to know whether you're going to go into the area of an applied research or fundamental research where you deal with only the theory, right? With applied, at least sometimes you have companies or industries that are really ready to use the data that comes out. In that case, you also become a good candidate for employment with those industries once you are done. So you might want to really ask some of those questions, and then also read around those things. It's important. And then we also have who are some of the other faculty or researchers you work with. So that's, I've already talked about that in terms of collaborators, right? And then the financial considerations. So in this case, you might want to be talking about, assuming, will I have enough money to cover my tuition fees and maybe accommodation or basic living? It's important, because what if they give you money for just your tuition fees and you don't have enough money for your accommodation and taking care of yourself, all right? So those ones are last minute questions. You don't want to bring out those things initially, okay? And then sometimes, because you're going to be publishing papers, you want to find out, so what is the convention for authorship? And this I don't really see it to be important, because if you want to see the convention for authorship, you can check from the professor's published work. Okay, so in my case, my master's student or my PhD student who did the work becomes the first author. All right, you are the first author in writing of my paper, because you do all the work, you do all the writing. And so, of course, you are the most important person on that paper. All right. And so when you have questions to ask, you can be asking questions. And when the professor also asks questions about that, you should be able to know how to talk about it. Sometimes you also want to find out student success. What is the student success rate in the group? Okay, because you just want to know what you are getting yourself involved with. But sometimes, again, student success is all dependent. I'll say 70% dependent on the student, or maybe even 90% dependent on the student. All right. It's hard work, that's for sure. It's hard work to be doing a research, taking courses, and then being a TA at the same time. And so it's something that you would have to kind of gear yourself up for when you are getting these opportunities, okay? And then personality. This is something you also want to watch out for, right? Sometimes you have to trust your instinct. If you think that you're not a good match with this prof, please don't go and talk to them about potential opportunities. But once you get that opportunity, then you might also want to check how, and as you are chatting with the prof, as they are also chatting with you, they are watching out for your personality, you are also watching out for their personality. So in the interview, remember, it's more of like both ways, right? They interview me, I interview them, but with the understanding that theirs is more of something, since they are the employer and they are the people that you are looking out for to fund your work, okay? So in effect, what I want to say is that if you send your CV and a cover letter and a transcript, okay, to the prof, and then you get an email that says that they want to have a chat with you, a discussion or whatever, first is an interview. So please go read about the professor's profile, go read about the professor's work, go read about what is going on in the lab of that prof or in that research group of that professor. If there is something you forgot, you might quickly want to brush up on some theories so that you can remember them, because I've seen interviews where profs have actually asked theoretical questions just to make sure if the candidate has the basics, so that we can build up on that, all right? And then if they ask you sometimes after the interview, they ask you to write research proposals, and we'll talk about that in other interviews. Now, when you're writing the email, you have to give some, I always tell people to make it more general, okay? If somebody writes to me and they tell me that, hello, Prof, I'm interested in your research. I want to come and do a research on, let's say, aircraft landing gears. And I'm thinking, do I have money for aircraft landing gears? Maybe not, all right? And then I'm thinking, since the student says they want aircraft landing gears, they're not a good match for me, so I'll just move on to the next person. But sometimes when I look at the CV and it's really a good match for something that I'm doing, I can actually tell them that, hey, I'm doing this and I think you might be a good fit. But I also don't want people to do things that they are not interested in. And there are a lot of applicants. You should know that, a lot of applicants. And so the pool is really a big one. But you can really stand out depending on how you carry yourself and sell yourself, okay? And then you have to be concise and straight to the point in terms of when you are doing the interviews, wherever, when you are writing to the prof, always concise, straight to the point. And then make sure that you check for admission requirements, you check for scholarship requirements, you check for funding requirements and all that. It's important when you are going to talk with the prof and all. And also give yourself some room. Make sure you are checking for what you are really signing up for, because it's important, okay? So that is it for the interviews. If you have any specific questions, please send the questions in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And then I'll bring you some more of these videos on other aspects, okay, including when you get admitted, how do you apply for your visas? When you get your visas and then you come in, how do you do the research itself? Okay, so I'll be giving some general tips on how to go about your literature review, how to write a good literature review, how to look out for or how to search for journal papers, the importance of journal papers over conferences, the importance of conferences over journal papers, and all these kind of things, all right? So expect more of these videos coming up soon. Okay, please send all your comments. If you also have a particular topic that you want me to address or talk about, please add it to the section, the comment section, and then I'll be more than happy to address it in my subsequent videos. Okay, I wish you good luck, and my prayer for you is that whatever you want will come to pass for you. Thank you. Take care.